Leclerc was spotted in Sardinia with Lawrence Stroll, but what does this meeting really mean, especially for the future of the Monegasque driver? In today's video, we will look at all the Ferrari-related news, including Vasseur's statements, Jerome D'Ambrosio's comments, and what Stefano Domenicali said about next year's rule changes and what is expected for the future of Formula One. But that's not all. We also need to discuss how the FIA is intervening on this regulation that will arrive next year, as something different is expected. Before we begin, please remember to leave a support like, and now let's look at all the news in detail. During the Formula One summer break, one piece of news caught the fans' attention. Charles Leclerc was seen in Sardinia with Lawrence Stroll. We know that Stroll owns Aston Martin and Formula One, and the image has sparked speculation about the future of the Monegasque driver, currently linked to Ferrari. But it's not just gossip. There are more concrete reasons behind the meeting. Leclerc has reiterated his desire to stay with Ferrari in recent interviews. However, in the paddock, it is considered normal for top drivers, especially in years of major regulatory changes, such as those coming in 2026, to keep other options open. There are no signs of a break with Maranello for now, but rather a natural phase of exploration. Ferrari remains his priority, but Leclerc, like any top driver, cannot afford to tie his future exclusively to one project, especially at a time when the 2026 World Championship will bring new technical challenges and a potentially revolutionary balance. To understand the significance of the meeting with Lawrence Stroll, one must look to the future of Aston Martin. Silverstone's team is undergoing a period of profound transformation. Adrian Newey has signed on to join the team, bringing his unique expertise in aerodynamics. He has previously helped Williams, McLaren, and even Red Bull to victory, and now he wants to help Aston Martin become a world champion team. Enrico Cardile, former technical director of Ferrari, will lead the development of the future racing car. And starting in 2026, Honda power units will arrive, one of the biggest uncertainties of the new regulations. These pieces make Aston Martin one of the most ambitious entities in the upcoming regulatory cycle, alongside Mercedes, a project that on paper can attract any top driver. Another significant element concerns Fernando Alonso. The Spanish driver, despite his commitment to Aston Martin, is not certain to stay beyond 2026. In case of departure, the vacant seat would be one of the most desirable on the grid, especially for those seeking competitive alternatives to Ferrari or even Red Bull. This is where the speculation of a meeting between Leclerc, his manager Nicholas Todd, and Lawrence Stroll originates, which cannot be considered a mere coincidence. It is plausible that exploratory contacts have been initiated in view of possible developments in the coming years. The message is clear. Today, Leclerc is the leader of Ferrari. Let's be clear, but the driver market is fluid and scenarios change rapidly. If Ferrari does not provide a winning car in 2026, the Monegasque could look around, and Aston Martin, with its technical investments and Honda support, represents a credible alternative. These are still rumors without official confirmation, but the contacts are plausible and logical. In the paddock, in fact, the game of negotiations has already begun. Those aiming for the top in 2026 must act now, securing preliminary agreements, at least keeping the channels of dialogue open. In summary, the meeting in Sardinia does not mean a break between Leclerc and Ferrari, but a clear signal that the driver and his entourage are moving with foresight. Loyalty to Maranello remains, but without technical certainties about the future, no door can be considered closed. And this is a fundamental aspect to consider, because Leclerc is currently a Ferrari driver and represents the future of the red team. At a time when Hamilton is struggling and in the final phase of his career, we need to think about Ferrari's future and who could be the lead driver for the team. Leclerc is confident. He has said so himself. I want a winning cycle with Ferrari, and I want to be its leader. But at the same time, it is important for the Monegasque driver to consider other options. And among all the teams, the new regulatory cycle, Aston Martin is the most attractive for Leclerc. Because there is a driver like Fernando Alonso leaving. Because in a few years he will retire. Unfortunately for Allo, who is a driver that excites us all. He is a very experienced driver, a two-time world champion, and one of the drivers I prefer and love the most on the grid. And he has driven the Aston Martin on this growth journey, probably able to bring it to the top in 2026, but then he will also have to think about his future. Leclerc could make agreements specifically for 2027 or 2028, in case Ferrari is not competitive next year. Lawrence Stroll wants an experienced driver with talent, and Leclerc is both at this moment. Because he has years of experience, started racing with Alfa Romeo in 2018, and since 2019 has remained with Ferrari. So he has many years behind him in Formula One. And at the same time, he is one of the strongest drivers on the grid, especially in qualifying. So he is a driver who can lead the car to win a world championship. So Leclerc keeps the door open for Lance Martin. The only unknown remains the Honda engine. I remember that it will be the only Honda-powered team in 2026, and so having only 2 cars on the grid using that engine doesn't give you much experience, and doesn't allow you to verify if there are engine problems, where these issues come from. While other engine departments that have various customer teams guarantee greater reliability and better development of the power unit, this remains Aston Martin's only unknown. But at the same time, Aston Martin has developed an impressive factory in England, which is ready to fight for the title from 2026. With a new wind tunnel, new infrastructure, it seems to be one of the teams likely to become a top team on par with the others, like Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, and even Red Bull. But let's also look at the situation at Ferrari regarding Frederic Vasseur. In Maranello, the engines are shut down for the 2-week mandatory summer break, but the tension remains very high, as Ferrari is currently at a crucial moment. 2025 did not meet expectations on the eve, and the weight of the promises made continues to burden Frederic Vasseur. Despite criticism, the French team principal received a renewal of trust from the Maranello leadership, a clear sign that the team wants to focus on stability in view of the major regulatory changes in 2026. Unlike in the past, when every disappointment led to changes in personnel and strategies, this time Ferrari has chosen continuity. Vasseur, at the helm in 2023, experienced complex seasons with fluctuating results and communication that was not always aligned with the drivers. The disagreements and statements between him and the Leclerc-Sainz duo fueled confusion and discontent, but management has decided to keep him. The idea is clear. During technical transition periods, stability is needed, just like what happened with Jean Todt at the end of the 1990s, when consistent management allowed the construction of the dream team that dominated in the early 2000s. To bring Ferrari back to the top, proclamations or statements of intent will not suffice. It is necessary to dismantle outdated logic. One of the issues concerns the historic closure of Maranello regarding England, the beating heart of modern Formula One. 9 out of 10 teams have operational bases in the UK, with direct access to a tech district that concentrates know-how, suppliers, and human resources. In the 1990s, John Barnard had pushed Ferrari to open a center in Guildford, but the project was limited. Today, with available digital technologies, geographical distance matters less, but the lack of a stable presence in England is still perceived as a hindrance. Notably, Audi, despite already having InWheel and Newborg. They decided to fully immerse themselves in the Aero Valley, a choice that Ferrari will have to face sooner or later. The real Achilles heel of the red team remains the correlation between simulations and the track. Since the end of private testing in 2009, Ferrari has lost the advantage of proprietary circuits, Fiorano and Mugello, and has relied entirely on wind tunnels and simulators. Despite the upgrade of the Maranello wind tunnel, difficulties persist. Conversely, McLaren and Aston Martin have built state-of-the-art facilities, while even Red Bull has abandoned the old Bedford tunnel for a new facility. Too often, the numbers generated in Maranello do not match the results on the track, leading to projects that seem competitive on paper but prove incomplete at debut. Beyond technical issues, Ferrari must solve an equally serious problem: communication. Contradictory statements between management and drivers. They fueled distrust and evasion among the fans. For Vassar, it will be essential to establish a clear line by explaining concrete objectives and realistic timelines. Promises that could turn into boomerangs are not needed, but a transparent roadmap to return to fighting at the top. Vassar's renewal is meant to provide stability. It is meant to build, not to prolong a phase of uncertainty. If results do not come, continuity risks turning into therapeutic obstinacy. Next year will therefore be decisive. Ferrari must reduce the gap from McLaren and send clear signals to its drivers and convince its fans that the path to the top has finally been taken. And Vassar made these statements about the new suspension. It is not the definitive solution, but it is for 2026. In fact, the new rear suspension was introduced at Spa-Francorchamps with a modification of the pull rod suspension arm, which remains the pull rod scheme. The inclination changes. It's a choice that has sparked debate among fans. Why hasn't there been a real change on the track? The Ferrari SF25, from the very first races, has struggled to manage ground clearance and was also disqualified after the race in China due to excessive wear of the skid block, caused precisely by this rear suspension, which couldn't maintain the SF25's ground height as the onboard fuel varied. Therefore, this new suspension was developed to solve a structural problem of the single-seater and works in synergy with the modified floor in Austria. Lewis Hamilton criticized Ferrari because they introduced this new suspension late, which was needed earlier, but the delay is justified because working on a suspension, its development, takes months. And it's never easy to work on a suspension, modify it, when it has a different layout. And when the car was designed with a different suspension, always pull rod, but with different attack angle geometries. And the goal of now introducing this new rear suspension is to also have time to work towards 2026, because the new suspension and also the braking system will be useful for next year. Only the aerodynamic part will not be transferable to the new project, since the flat bottom is that of 2026, compared to the ground effect cars of this year and past years. So what Vassar said, essentially, is that everything we learn now is useful for next year. And Vassar also took a risk. It's better to bring this suspension now, mid-year, in view of next year, rather than bringing it later and risking not being ready for 2026. Of course, introducing suspension as early as possible brings numerous advantages, while when you introduce such an important update mid-season, you face a series of issues such as weight increase, some aerodynamic load losses, and also some changes in driving dynamics, because the car was originally designed for a different suspension setup. Vassar was very nervous before the race in Belgium, because the rear suspension update was very important, introduced during a sprint weekend, but it then delivered the expected results with Leclerc's podium, and then provided even more confidence in Hungary, with a good first part of the race by the Monegasque, who was there, fighting with McLaren for the victory. But let's also hear Jerome D'Ambrosio's statements. D'Ambrosio had the opportunity to personally oversee the pit wall, replacing Vassar at the Austrian Grand Prix 2025, when the Frenchman was absent for personal reasons. On that occasion, he received praise both within the team and among fans, thanks to the solid management of the weekend and clear interviews given after the race. Interviewed by the Belgian daily La Libra, D'Ambrosio has taken stock of his first few months in Maranello. Life in Italy is different, and Ferrari is a team apart. I understood this right away. Here, everything is experienced in an amplified way compared to other Formula One experiences, he explained. The former driver shared how the Ferrari environment is not limited to the gates of the sporting management. Ferrari is a religion for many Italians. Every morning, when I have a coffee near the factory, people ask me how the race weekend went. There are fans who stay in front of the entrance every day. Each person experiences Ferrari in a unique way. D'Ambrosio emphasized how the intensity of the fan support is a distinctive trait of Ferrari, capable of transforming every moment into something greater. Everything is amplified around Ferrari, both in good times and difficult ones. It's up to us to filter and manage this pressure. Being approached by fans is always nice, but what strikes me most is feeling a force Ferrari in any circumstance. The support that reaches the public is extraordinary. These are the words of D'Ambrosio, who is now gaining even more importance at Ferrari and probably in the coming years could also replace the French team principal, and maybe in the coming years he will also work alongside the French team principal even more. D'Ambrosio is Vasseur's right hand and therefore is essential also in Vissal 2026, and it is important that he adapts well to the Ferrari environment. But let's see what Domenicali said about V8 engines in Formula 1. Yes, because they might return soon. Stefano Domenicali, president and CEO of Formula 1 Group, outlined a clear vision for the future of power unity in Formula 1. He reiterated the possibility of a return to V8 or even V10 engines with hybrid technology and powered by sustainable synthetic fuels. According to Domenicali, the next major technical revolution may not consist in the introduction of a radically new technology, but in a return to the past reinterpreted with modern criteria. Enthusiasts have shown strong support for the idea. 87% of fans have declared themselves in favor of a return of V8 or V10. It is a confirmation of what they have long supported. Hybrid V8s paired with eco-friendly fuels and fuel would represent an extraordinary solution for the future of Formula 1. This is what former Ferrari team principal Domenicali explained. According to Domenicali, the goal is to reconcile spectacle and sustainability, ensuring a sound and power typical of the tradition of Formula 1, but with a strong reduction of environmental impact. Liberty Media's CEO also emphasized that one must not lose focus on the ongoing work. The priority remains to develop the 2026 power units, he declared. In the next 2 years, it will be essential to build a solid regulation. Then, once that cycle is underway, we could discuss specifically of the future of engines V8 hybrids. Domenicali also addressed the topic of hydrogen, often cited as a possible fuel of the future, and said it is an interesting and potential technology, but I don't believe it will be feasible in the next 10 years. There are too many uncertainties related to safety and logistics, not to mention that Formula 1 does not deal with mass mobility, but with motorsport at the highest levels. At the moment, it would be too complicated and risky to consider races with hydrogen. For this reason, the line drawn by Domenicali is clear: Formula 1 must continue to innovate, but without losing its identity. And speaking of which, in 2026, Nicolas Tombasai also weighed in on the new engine rules, the person responsible technically for the federation. Tombasai explained that the regulations are still a work in progress, which is a negative factor in the sense that we still do not have a clear regulation, because there is still the uncertainty of having to step on the brake on the right track in some tracks such as Monza, and this is unacceptable, arriving a year early with a still unclear idea of what the effect will be of the new regulations on the track. But the very time is a positive factor because at least they can change regulations midway to better adapt to the new cars. Tombasai stated, "We have always known that increasing electric power and reducing that of the internal combustion engine would lead to management issues. The driver's feedback on the simulator is valuable precisely to correct these criticalities. The rules are evolving and there will be modifications to make the cars more natural to drive. We absolutely want drivers to have to lift off the gas on the straights. Those who want to go faster must be able to push to the limit, and it seems to me something absolutely basic in Formula 1. Tombasai clarified that it will not be possible to modify the engine formula. The fundamental specifications of the power units are now fixed too late for radical changes. This is because any variations would trigger inevitable political battles among manufacturers, each interested in protecting their investments. The intangible part that can still be corrected concerns electric energy, maximum recoverable amount, distribution per lap, and release speed on straights, along with similar parameters. These will be the tools through which the FIA can intervene to ensure credible races. The most important way is to ensure transparency between teams and the federation to also increase the credibility of the FIA, which has been lost in recent years. In summary, the base rules for 2026 will no longer change. Formula 1 will have hybrid power units with a much more significant electric component. However, the FIA is aware of the risks and intends to correct critical issues before the official debut to avoid apocalyptic scenarios such as cars shutting down. A straight-line fine regarding the electrical part or single-seater, which go with half of the power on the straight, which are unacceptable scenarios and attention and use system, is coming to Formula 1 for 2026 called Odwa, and it will operate like the BUP in endurance racing. But regarding Formula 1, let's look in detail at what it is with the new technical cycle that will start in 2026. Formula 1 is preparing to face a total revolution, especially on the front of hybrid. Power units, the goal is to ensure sustainability and balance, but FIA is aware of the risks the introduction of new rules could create too large gaps between teams. For this reason, a new mechanism has been devised called Odwa Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities, designed to help struggling manufacturers without resorting to a true BP balance of performance. But it works in a fairly similar way. Nicholas Dunbasis, FIA single-seater technical director, explained in detail the functioning of the system. Every 5 to 6 races performance will be measured the average of each engine manufacturer. The manufacturers who will fall below a preset threshold will receive benefits proportional to their deficit. These advantages will not directly affect the power or the weight of the cars, but will consist of extra resources for development. Specifically, the disadvantaged teams will be able to obtain an additional budget to work on the power unit, extra hours at the test bench, and the possibility to carry out a new homologation of the engine. In this way, the weaker manufacturers will have the opportunity to catch up without undermining meritocracy on the track. Another crucial issue is reliability. The new power units 2026 will be extremely complex and costly. The excessive number of failures could weigh disproportionately on the budget cap. For this reason, Tom Basis clarified that the FIA is working on a complementary system. Surpassed a certain number of broken engines, the affected teams will receive a reduction of the budget cap dedicated to the power units, so as not to compromise the entire technical development of the season. The concept of the ADO resembles the balance of performance used in endurance and other categories, but there are substantial differences. The BP intervenes directly on on-track performance, weight, power, fuel flows, artificially leveling the values on the track. The ADO, on the other hand, does not touch the parameters of the single-seater. It only offers additional tools to develop and recover. This way, the meritocratic philosophy of Formula 1 remains intact, where the best design continues to have an advantage. The goal of the ADO is to keep the gaps close between teams in Formula 1 so that those struggling with failures, reliability issues, or poor engine performance can recover with more hours of bench development and even extra budget. This can help the bottom-ranked teams staying close to the mid-table and top-tier teams so that the scenarios from 2014 don't reoccur with Mercedes, who was running away every race having total dominance. But on the contrary, the standings remain more closely packed. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we discussed in the video, from the Leclercs to St. Martin to Vassar's statements about 2026 to Jerome D'Ambrosio and the BUP theme of the duo in Formula 1. Tell me your thoughts. I'm curious to read and respond to all your comments. As always, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel here from Rastro. That's all. See you in the next video.